Hello, everybody. Welcome to the session. I'm so glad you're able to be here. We got a few, housekeeping type of things, which you're probably already seen with some of the other sessions. First up, we're going to take a look at the code of conduct. Now, my general rule of thumb is, kind of be nice to everybody, but there are some specifics on code of conduct, how you should be acting, especially in the Discord server where you're going to be talking to other folks. So make sure you go take a look at that full code of conduct. Try to make it a nice and pleasant experience for everybody. Now, a very important thing that's been happening in this event is that we have several sponsors for this event, and they have been sending through their sponsorship as donations to the National Museum of Computing, which is a great organization. And if you feel like you might be able to support them as well, I think the organizers would really love you to be able to help them out. Now, speaking of sponsors, we've got four main sponsors for this event today. They have a chance to win a ticket for an NDC conference available, so make sure that you go in and check that out. I'm sure there's some more details over in the Discord channel that you could ask about if you got any questions. And finally, if you would like to, say, share images of what you've seen here during the session, or you want to ask some questions, go check out the hashtag DDD 2021 or follow @DeveloperDay, and you'll be able to get everything you need to know about the event, this one, or future ones. And with that, let's get started. I hope everybody's been having good sessions today. You could probably tell so far by the accent that I'm one of the several global speakers at today's event. I hail from a little town called Ottawa in Canada. I have been living here most of my life, but I've tried to, get out in the world sometimes as part of my role to be able to go and see different places. So hopefully one day I'll be coming to a DDD in person. Now, make sure that you join the Discord. There's a channel for this session. You can ask questions there or chat with each other, and I'll make sure that I jump in there, answer any questions you have. And if we've got some time at the end of the session, maybe we can do a few live. Now, today, what I want to chat about is there's an awkward moment when you are a member of a team, and then you decide to start leading that team. When you make this kind of transition, it's usually because you've demonstrated some sort of expertise. Now, maybe it was a leadership quality, like you're really good at working across departments, or maybe you go up and down the ladder really well, or you're really opinionated and you're really passionate about what you believe in. Whatever it is, you've shown something that other people are seeing, and so they want you to take this new thing on. And now all of a sudden, your teammates are calling you boss. But you can find this transition hard. I know I found it difficult to do because you get used to kind of being in the trenches, saving the day, building the thing, right? That being an expert. And there's a certain dopamine hit you get when you move that task to done and you get it done. And going to a more leadership position with more strategic type of work, it can take a while, like months or quarters or years before the thing you're working on and pushing and driving actually comes to be something. So it can be hard to let go of that other side of the world. Now, my name is Jason St Cyr. I lead our group of global developer advocates over at Sitecore. And today what I want to go through is kind of the stories of what I've had to go through my career, and hopefully how some of that might be able to help you. Now, I've got a couple of key kind of challenges I want to talk through today. First, how do we go about delegating and kind of balancing that independent and manager role? I secondly want to talk about there's a different kind of decision making that you need to do where the answers might not always be clear. And I next want to talk about the kind of the shedding of being a subject matter expert, of no longer being the go-to, instead rolling more into a coach role. After that, there's a little part of middle management about being in the middle I want to address. And finally, wrap up a little bit about mental health, a very important section, how do we prevent burnout and that type of thing in this transition. Now, you may have noticed from the graphics I'm using so far, There's a little theme here around toys. This whole talk is a lot about stories and how we can learn from those stories. And as a dad, I've got several kids here, and I try to use toys and telling stories to try to make things be understood and help them learn something and have it resonate, because stories allow us to have this kind of emotional connection to the content. And it creates this recall moment. So like, let's say you're a Star Wars fan, and I say, let the Wookiee win. You know what part of the movie I'm talking about. You're transported back to that point in time. And that's what we want to do with stories, especially when we have learning moments from them. We want to create those recall points where something we have learned, we can go back to and go, oh yeah, that's right. Or you encounter a situation and you say, oh, this is like that time. And you can remind yourself of what you want to go through. And so hopefully those of you out there, you're making your own stories. Remember to try to create those recall moments. Now let's get started. The first section I wanted to talk about was about delegation. And I've talked with a lot of colleagues and fellow managers and things like that. And a lot of us have gone through the same kind of difficulty when making a transition inside a team. We've got all these expectations on us of what we used to do. And giving that up is super tough. I know that was definitely true for me, trying to make that transition. The very first time that I became a manager, I was in a small product company, leading the R&D team. Super great people, really smart. I found I was still doing a lot of dev work, DevOps stuff, all kinds of things, even though I was supposed to be managing the team. Now, with the benefit of years separation, I'm able to look back. I'm able to say to myself, I probably gave myself some options. You know, I could throw away like almost a decade of experience in doing what I did best and try to really focus on being a good manager. Or I could try to do a little bit of both, not really do either one well, but kind of keep some of it that I was used to that could keep me confident. Or I could try to do both jobs, which of course is the one I chose, right? Like, let's try to do as much possible. And I learned so much. I learned about release management and team management and things like SWOT analysis. It was great, except I also learned about how to burn yourself out in under a year. You see, because I found it really, really hard to give up all that stuff I used to be doing, because I knew I could do it. And I knew if I wanted to give it to somebody else on the team, I was going to have to figure out a way to train them. And not only that, now that I was managing, I knew everything that was on their plates. So if I take my stuff and I start putting that on their plates, it's either not going to get done or I'm going to have to have something else get dropped. So like, how am I going to balance all this? Now, eventually what happened is I couldn't take it anymore. It was too much. I'd put too much on myself. And I decided to leave and find another job. Guess what happens then? All those tasks I was doing that I couldn't give to anybody else, somebody had to pick up anyway. And they did great. There was no problems. The only person who was blocking that from happening was me. So that was a big learning moment for me to understand that this was important for me to give these things away and let my team go and run with things. Now, I've done this a couple of times now, and I've always faced the same challenge every time. I like to think I'm getting better at it, but even just like this year, I was training somebody on how to upload videos to a video portal. Like, this is a task I probably should not have been doing for years now, but I'd held on to. And there's all these little things that I keep holding on to, and I know I need to get better at looking at these tasks and figuring out, is this a task that is strategic and driving, or are these more execution level, independent contributor types of tasks? Now, the first question about, is it a driving strategic piece? Those are things I need to hold on to, right? Like, that's clearly what my role is supposed to be. I can grab onto those. It seems like an easy, those I keep. Then there's those ones that's like, no experience required, right? It's like if I gave somebody access and kind of showed them where it was, anyone could do it. those types of things, those are easy to say, look, I got to get those off my plate. Like the uploading videos thing, like that is nothing that has experience from me that like, oh, I'm leveraging so much expertise to press the upload button. Now, the hard ones are transferable expertise, is what I call them, but it's the ones where I am the only one who knows how to do this. I am the only one with expertise. Somebody else could gain that expertise if they were trained long enough, however long that might take, and have enough experience doing it. But that's going to take time. And those are so tough to let go because we can get it done now if I do it. But in the long run, how do I solve that? Now on the slide here, I've referred to, am I holding the reins? So it's kind of like the sled and driver kind of story. In that case, you need somebody who's going to do the hard work of pulling the sled. Somebody has to get you where you need to go and do that work. But you also need a driver who's not worried about that, but is instead looking ahead. Are we on the right path? Are we going fast enough or too fast? Are there any obstacles in the way? And is giving corrections as you go along. You don't try to do both roles. You want to have people who are working together as a team. And that's what ultimately I try to envision is like which side of that sled am I working on? So ultimately what I learned from this is that I am not a person who can do two jobs. It just doesn't work for me. And I also learned that when I share things out to other people, it's often I'm blocking them from growing. I'm blocking them from doing it better than I ever could. And so part of me delegating is, yes, getting my load lighter, but it's also making sure the right work goes to the right people with the right expertise who have the right allocation of time to do it. And trying to do all of that is not going to work. I become a bottleneck and I'm not providing growth opportunities to my team. So I needed to learn a little bit more about that sharing, about being able to give stuff away and help people do that. And this is obviously something you have to get better and better at every day. Just see how can I get one more thing that I shouldn't be doing and then take something else on instead. Now, the next challenge I wanted to talk to is about a kind of difference in decisions and questions that come up. So I found very often as a developer that things were complex, there were hard problems to solve, and there were many ways to get there, but it was really easy to know when you got there. Like getting to done, you knew it was done. And sometimes you had to iterate, but there was a clear definition usually of what done meant. I have not found that in the more strategic work, and having to not be sure if you're right is really hard to me. I really love being right. I love arguing to the point of well past constructive behavior just so I could be right. Like that was a thing that I really loved doing when I was younger. I probably still do too much right now. But I haven't found that has translated well. Yeah, I found it very difficult to get away from that kind of self-directed decision making where it's about me and trying to open up and look at more things around me. I think part of that was being inflexible. Early on when I was a manager, this was definitely an issue that I had. So I remember a time I was sitting in a boardroom, people were drawing on the whiteboard, you know, what managers always do. And I remember somebody drawing a cliff. I don't remember why the cliff was there, but the implication was we were going to go over this cliff. What I do remember is I didn't care. See, my team had found some kind of issue in the release. I didn't feel the release was ready to go out, so we weren't going to put it out. I didn't care what deadlines customers had. I didn't care what they needed. I didn't care what the business wanted. I was looking at software delivery as a software developer. Like, this is the right way we do software. Here's how we maintain quality. This is what will go out the door. It never occurred to me in that room that I was wrong. It never occurred to me to look at it at what they call the bigger picture, right? I was looking at it as a practitioner, not as a member of management, not as somebody who's balancing that there's needs of the business or needs of customers. I needed to know that there could be another way. And similarly, on the inflexibility thing, there's another form of making decisions in the hiring process. Now, it was a long time ago that this happened, but I was involved in this hiring process for a new role at our company. And they weren't going to report to me, but ultimately they were going to be shadowing me. I was going to be mentoring them. Their success was going to be my responsibility. So we go through this hiring process and I'm helping review all these candidates. And I recommend we go with someone named Chad. Their name was not really Chad. It's just for this session, they'll be Chad. Now, Chad was awesome in the interview. Super great communication skills, excellent sense of humor, seemed to really fit in with the vibe of the team, seemed to really be able to think on their feet. And, you know, they may have lacked a little bit in the technical skills that were specific to that role, but they had a lot of translating kind of skills that we could use, and you can kind of pick that stuff up. So this seemed like a slam dunk, let's go for it. So we get into the first project. And it's a total disaster. I'm not talking about what Chad was doing. Like, our most experienced people who really knew what we were doing, including me, were struggling. This was not a good choice as a first project. Chad was struggling more than everybody else. But I had my blinders on because this was a really tough project, and I ignored some red flags. I ignored red flags because I felt, okay, it's the situation. You know, Chad wasn't learning from mistakes. Chad wasn't, you know, able to seem to comprehend when we were giving information. You'd have to repeat it a lot of times. And there seemed to be always like Chad was rushing to get things done, not really trying to think through what need to be done, you know, missing things, that type of stuff. But I chalked it up like, look, this is a bad project. This is someone we put them in the deep end. This was not a great way to learn how to swim. But those same flags kept coming up project after project. And I mean, eventually we had to decide this just wasn't working out. And Chad was able to go on and have a great career and have other roles at different companies, but it wasn't a fit for that role. But through that all, I couldn't accept that I was wrong in deciding that this was the right fit. I kept thinking, I got to keep investing. Couldn't possibly be that I was wrong. Kept putting on myself like I just haven't done it the right mentorship yet or something like that. And so it's easy now for me to look back and go, oh, wow, Jason was wrong. But at the time, it was super, super tough. What these stories kind of told me and helped me learn was that I had to go beyond myself. I had to adapt my thinking. There were going to be multiple pieces to a solution. It didn't all come from me. I didn't know everything. I needed to be able to take in these other pieces and make a new whole. And it's not that I should ignore my instincts. It's not that I should ignore my expertise, but that it was only a part of what was going to ultimately be built and put together. So I think that was a big thing that I had to learn. Not that I've learned it completely, but I'm working on it. Now, the next challenge I want to talk about is switching off that expert mode. We're kind of in a situation when we're a member of the team that you're an expert usually in something. There's something you are really, really good at, and now you happen to be the boss. But when you're in that same team and you demonstrated that kind of excellence at doing that and you have all that expertise, like it's very, very relevant to what the team's working on right now. Then you look at what you're taking on as your actual main task as a leader. And while you were used to actually knowing what you were doing, now you have to know things like coaching and mentorship and strategic planning and possibly some project management, that type of stuff. So you don't feel as comfortable with the work that's now on your shoulders. You know, for me, I found this tough because I was always used to knowing what I was doing. I had all this experience at it. I knew how to get it done. And then suddenly it felt like I was starting all over. This is all going to be new to me. Like, how do I do things like delegation? And one of the challenges that came with that when I made that transition was, how do I build trust? How is the team going to think this is going to work when clearly I don't know what I'm doing? So I wasn't sure, even if my teammates seemed like they were totally on board with this, I didn't feel it. It was kind of like an imposter syndrome, right? It's like nobody's figured out yet that I don't know what I'm doing. So how do I know that they're going to trust that I'm going to make the right decisions, that we're going to get where we need to go? Now, eventually you can kind of build that up. Over time, I think I found a few things that worked for me. One was, how do I get an early win, right? How do in this new setup, we do something good? So everybody gets that kind of early feeling of like, yeah, this could work. We can do this. I wanted to have that. And then if something hiccups later on, everybody's already got that mind at like, okay, it's not the setup that we have because we know we can do something. And secondly, I needed to figure out a way to have a better empathy of understanding of what my team was going through. I had to show more understanding of their situations. Probably the one that helped a lot though was honesty. Like being very open and transparent about what was going on and having a slightly different relationship there, because we used to be colleagues. So I felt like, we could be a little more open. That helped give some time for us all to adjust and learn to the new scenario. Now, I mentioned empathy, and one of the things that's related to that is I found it difficult when transitioning from a member of the team and having all that expertise to turn that off and know when I was supposed to turn it on. As an example, I was on a call with one of my reports, and they had some question, or they were asking a question. My head went into full-on expertise mode, and I started going this long-winded thing about all these options and what they could do and look into, and they thankfully they stopped me and said, whoa, Jason, I know about the options. I have already looked into that. What I need from you is to look at this plan that I put together. Is this something you can support? Do you see any problems with it? And thankfully this happened, right? Because it becomes a light bulb moment where I'm going, oh, wait, you're not coming to me as like the member of the team who knows about this stuff. You're coming to me as the manager who needs to approve on the work, who is going to help them make this plan better. I needed to bring a different set of skills and be more situationally aware. And this comes down to empathy with and coaching and that kind of stuff, right? Is that I need to realize that people aren't coming to me to be an expert. That's not my role anymore. And sometimes that might be the case. Maybe somebody in another team still sees me as that and I can provide that. But my role is to be there for my team and provide them the thing that they need at that moment and know based on cues, like what is it that they need right now. So a lot of this all came down to learning about listening. That the focus wasn't on me. The focus had to be on them. And it was not easy. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do to switch that focus, but reacting to a situation and being able to determine what that is was incredibly important. And one of the things that I did find expertise helpful for, especially really early on in that transition, was that I knew exactly what they were going through. I had just been doing that job. So I know what challenges they're facing. I know what it's like to work with the leader that's leading that team. So it makes it easier to empathize because I have contextual background. So this is something day to day we can just get better at doing, about just trying to ask probing questions and try to gain more understanding of the situation when we're in a conversation and just listen more. Now, the next challenge that I wanted to get into is that fun part of middle management. Say, when you're a member of a team, it's not exclusive, but usually pressure applies one way. You have your manager, team lead, whoever it is, who's kind of applying pressure down on like, this is what we need to get done. And then you are pushing up going, hey, this is what's on my plate. These are my priorities. This is what we have to do, or this is what I need. So that one direction, you can kind of manage it. But when you go into that management layer or that leadership layer and suddenly all the layers are coming in at you, you've got people reporting into you that are your responsibility. They need things. You need to apply pressure to them. You got your management. Then you got other teams. You're juggling all of these incoming requests, and it can feel like a lot. Sometimes you can juggle it. Sometimes you just got to push back. And I found that it could be very difficult to know when to push back. Now, many years ago, when I was at an implementation agency, I was in a scenario which probably pushed every side of the iron triangle of just, it was really tough for me to adapt to. And I had a hard time seeing what my team needed. So my team was struggling with this project. So earlier I mentioned the project nobody should start on. Yeah, that one. This had a very, very fixed date, like real world dates. There's no way you can move it. Something is happening legally. You got to be ready. And my management was very firm that there was no more money to be had. This budget was fixed. So you got your fixed time, you got your fixed budget, which didn't leave me a lot of movement, but our scope was fixed. And the team was telling me, we're not going to hit the timeline. I had never felt that iron triangle more than in that moment. And I sat down and I was trying to think this through, and I'm going, there's got to be some kind of way we can play with these dates and like do some things in parallel. Maybe there is a way for us to do this. So I came up with a plan. Seemed all good in my head, right? As all the plans do, you know, looks good on paper. So it sounded great until everything went completely wrong. Now we escaped out of there barely, but nobody was happy. We were way over budget. My management was not happy. The customer didn't get stuff when they wanted, didn't get exactly what they wanted, and felt like we'd been kind of moving things around. They were not happy. And to get there, we had to do a crazy ton of overtime. So my team was not happy. So in the end, the project leadership group got together and we had this massive retrospective of what went wrong, and so much went wrong. We filled a whole wall full of stuff that went wrong. But there is one thing that stood out to me. I never said no. I never stood up and said, the team can't do this. This is not right. I never stood up for my team, and I regret that so much. So that's the big thing I learned from that situation. Now, there's another side of going into management, especially early on in your career. And that's kind of like, there's no experience when you don't have experience doing it. So the first time I became a manager, I remember going into a boardroom, and I think we were acquired, like not right at that point, but like fairly recently. So we had like new owners, new executives, and all the leadership was there. And I remember them asking me for the product roadmap. And I'm like, sure, yeah, we're going to release version 4.2 on this date, and then 4.3 will be out on this date. Because I didn't realize this, but at the time, 20 years ago, we were doing something that would eventually be called Agile. We were, you know, doing weekly releases out to QA, and we were kind of iterating constantly. We had these release candidates that were ready. Our scope was flexible. You know, it worked really well for us. We were loving it. You know, we knew exactly when a specific release would go out, and we just adjusted our scope. But see, that's not what they wanted. They wanted to know what was in that release. They don't want, oh, it's 4.7. No, they want to know, what customer business problems are we solving? I mean, okay, yeah, this makes sense. This makes sense. But how am I going to do that? I have no idea how long that's going to take. We haven't even looked at what the requirements are. How am I going to forecast out? I didn't have the experience. I knew something was off. something was wrong with this approach. And years later, I would learn more about product roadmap management and how you go about communicating those things, but I didn't know that then. Now, even if Matrix style someone like jacked me up and was like, I know Kung Fu, and suddenly I could know everything there was to know about product management, I still would not have felt the confidence in that room. Like, they all knew what they were talking about. They've done this before. Who am I to go and question that, right? This is my first time leading an R&D team. What is this inexperience was a hurdle. That was definitely a point where I knew I wanted to do something, but I didn't know how. And I didn't feel confident. And that's something that is hard to get past. It's a challenge. So the main takeaway that I learned from that was that, yes, as a leader, my role is that I need to be able to stand up and say, hey, this is not happening. This is not the way we're going to do it. I learned that every time I try to make everybody happy at the expense of my team, it never worked out in the end. And I also learned from that I was eating away at my own credibility. But still, I struggle. I struggle with saying no. I struggle with not helping people. I'm a naturally supporting type of person, like I want to make sure you can get your thing done. So sometimes I've had to switch it to yes, if, and kind of put the onus back on them to like, if you're okay with these conditions, I can help you. And that helps me a little bit in that. But sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes somebody comes along and says, yeah, you're going to do it anyway. And yeah, that sucks. But I feel like knowing that I went to bat, that I went and said, I will do everything I can to make sure my team is in the situation they need to be. I can always look back and be proud of that and not regret it like I did when I didn't. Now, the final challenge that I want to talk about is really important, and it's about mental health. There is so much, probably billions of things that have been written about well-being and mental health and work-life balance, and I don't want to rehash all of that. I would say that when you are transitioning inside of a team, that there's an unusually high chance that you're going to see a burnout situation, just the nature of what it is. It's really hard, like I said, to give up everything you were used to doing. Like there's a lot of expectation on you having done that. And then now there's all these new expectations of what you're going to do next. And it can be tough to balance all that and face any stresses that are coming along. So there's an unusually high chance of that burnout. And early on in the talk, I talked about the 2 jobs thing. I was not doing well right then. I thought something really bad might happen. I couldn't handle it anymore, and I started looking around. I wanted to find anything that was different, and what I did was I blamed it on the management work. I said, clearly I am not like these other folks that are up here doing management. I can't handle it. They seem to have it under control. So it must be me, it must be the management thing. I'm not a fit. I need to go find something that's more execution level, right? Because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I need to focus on something. So I went and I got myself a new job, and about 3 months in, I started joining Tiger teams, suggesting process changes, trying to lead groups. I couldn't help myself. Somehow I was still feeling better. Like, how did that happen? How was I doing probably almost as much, if not more, strategic type of work, but not feeling that pressure? And when I look back at it, it was because that transition to management, I didn't transition. I did both jobs. When I walked into this new job, there was no expectations on what I should be doing, I shouldn't be doing, or like there was no task assigned to me. I got to carve it out. I got to say, this is what I'm going to work on, and this is how I'm going to go about doing it. I was able to create my balance. And ultimately, that's how I was able to achieve a better work-life balance. So I got rid of all that stuff. That's what I needed to do at the last job. I need to get rid of all that stuff. I needed to create a work-life balance that was going to work for me, that I could sustain. Now, we were all very aware of what happened a couple years ago. Well, it's almost a couple years ago now. A lot of people have had really rough years. A lot of really bad stuff going on. People have lost folks close to them. And it was really tough to try to keep going in our jobs. I thought that I had it pretty good. I was on a team that was already globally distributed, already fully remote. I'd been doing it for several years. I thought I had this manager independent contributor thing totally unlocked before this pandemic even hit. So I figured, like, this is no change. But then it felt like stuff was piling up. It suddenly felt like I hit a limit again, and I started feeling like I had before, and I didn't understand what was happening. I already had everything balanced the way I liked it. I felt good, and then all of a sudden this pandemic hits, which didn't change my work at all. And what's going on? See, it turns out working from home in a pandemic is not the same as working from home. You have lack of childcare available. Your family is not able to be around. You're not able to have the same outlets you used to have for relaxing and stress release. Can't go on vacations, that type of thing. It starts to add up. And I started to recognize that, it wasn't about work this time. What hadn't occurred to me was that I'd only been focused on making sure I was balancing the work. I was trying to avoid the problem I'd had before. I didn't notice that the side on the ledger for life needed more from me now. The fact that my work hadn't changed didn't matter. My life side of the equation had changed the balance, and I wasn't compensating for it. I'm going to put a little caution word up on this. As long as this slide is up, just want to mention that, we're going to be talking about things like cancer, death, and you can always just mute me until this slide goes away if it's going to be an issue. So dealing with the pandemic was one way that we look at things and things that were hitting me in my personal life. Now, over the last few years, we've also had something else in my family. My mother-in-law had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So for 2 years, mostly during the pandemic, family life was very, very different. We were just trying to make everything out of every day. And this past summer, just a few months ago, things changed, went for the worse. And that balance I was talking about, right? The life part fully weighed down on that side there. And when you have to deal with loss as a family, it affects your work to a huge extent, right? My team had some amazing projects, big projects, really important. They were underway. I just couldn't be there for them. I tried to do some office hours just in case something was urgent, just so they would know that, I was there, but majority of every day, I couldn't be there. I had to take time off. And definitely the pandemic helped me learn about that life balancing piece and prepared me for what I needed to do then, which was that I needed to focus on that personal life side. That mental health and balancing your family life is super important. You need to prioritize that. You need to make that an important part. And sometimes that makes it tough on the work side of things. And I was privileged to be able to be in a scenario where I could move that, but it was hard. It was hard to get on a call and keep a straight face. It was hard to see these important projects that I wanted to be a part of moving on, and I couldn't be a part of it the way I wanted to. Now, I'm able to be here today and I can talk about this because my management understood that this was important to me. They understood that they needed to make room for me to be able to do this. I was able to do that because leadership showed empathy and they understood the balance of mental health and how in the long run, that's what mattered. So that was great. That was great for me. But what I realized from that, what I learned from that is that how do I do that? How do I ask the right questions to my team? How do I keep an eye on what's going on so that when they need something, I can be there for them, that I can give them what they need. So this loss, when it becomes a heavy burden on them, that as a leader, I can do what my leadership did for me. So that was the thing that I got out of that. And all of this comes down to balance. All of it comes down to how do I make sure that I'm not taking on too much? I think recognizing burnout symptoms is really a great tool to have. It unfortunately means you have to get burned out at some point. So if you've already done that, yay, you're one step ahead of the game. But there are professionals who can help you with monitoring your mental health. It's a great tool to have. So having that monitor for those symptoms allows you to recognize something's off, and then you can start adjusting. And that balancing bit is so important. So sometimes for me, that balance means saying no, stop doing something. And that helps give some space for other things. And sometimes what it means is adding something on. Maybe it's a recharge, right? So for me, I'll pop on to the Xbox and play for like 30 minutes on something, and I can feel myself kind of relaxing and getting into a different headspace. Finding those recharge outlets, whatever it is for you. I used to play ball hockey too. That was another thing. I could go out, do some exercise that way, and that felt really good and would re-energize me. We need to find those recharge moments too. That helps with the balance of helping make everything lift a little bit more. Now, thank you so much for sticking through this whole session. I am so glad that you were able to be here. We took a look at a few challenges, but this isn't everything that happens. This is what we could go through, and hopefully you can use these as building blocks. And then start looking at other challenges you're seeing as you make this transition and see how these might be able to help you or how you might be able to do something similar. We looked at how we could share more, how we could delegate. We looked at how we can change our way of thinking and kind of accept that we need to look at that bigger picture. We looked at empathy and changing the focus away from us and onto our team and listening more. I also talked a little bit about the whole pushing back piece, right? Where we protect our team and we're there to make sure they have what they need and punching up. And the last section, we talked about monitoring for mental health, making sure we balance, making sure we're going to be there for our team in the long run because it's a marathon and we don't want to sprint it. And I went through a whole bunch of stories, and hopefully some of those experiences resonate with something you're going through. But there's a bunch we didn't cover today, and there's a bunch you probably went through. So hopefully you can share some of your ideas, some of what you're going through. We do have the Discord channel that's available. We can put questions in there. I'd love for you to be able to reach out to me as well. I'm constantly on a journey here as well. I'm trying to learn more. I want to know what you're going through. I want to know how you were able to solve things. And maybe I can figure out a new way of doing something too. So if you have any questions, drop them in the Discord, and I'll join in there and chat as well. And we might have some questions now. I haven't checked it yet. Caitlin, do you know if we have any questions in the Discord channel?
We don't at the moment.
All right. Well, don't forget, we have feedback forms. So both for the event and the session, make sure you go and fill those out. And I'm going to jump over into that Discord chat, and I'm there available if you want to talk either one-on-one in DMs, or we can chat right there in the channel. Take her easy, everyone. Have a great day.